My name is Maria Cuevas, and I'm 73. The thought that just occurred to me is that something that someone has created, any kind of artistic work, especially after they've passed on, is a memorial to them in their life. No matter that they be a really great or experienced artist in any field or not, an amateur artist. But it was a creativity that came out of their being that says something to them, about them, that says something to me about them. Well, as you get older, more people you know pass on. Younger people, older people, myself in a while, God knows how many years. So to think about memorializing people that I knew, either personally or someone in the public sphere, is probably to make first of all, to make a list of everything that they've accomplished, from the really small, mundane things, raising children, working in the world, trying to be a better person. Well, I'm Puerto Rican. My parents were born and raised in Puerto Rico, and when people pass on, I went to my own mom's funeral, and she passed on 15, 20 years ago. And what Puerto Ricans do is they pray at the funeral. They sing. My mother loved to sing, so her sisters were all there, and they all sang songs that she loved. And they all said the rosary in Spanish, and I really didn't know the words. But I'm not a religious person, so for me personally, that kind of religiosity doesn't really move me, but in that case it did, because it was very personal and meant something to all of them. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's how Puerto Ricans do it. Many cultures do it that way, so it's not something unique to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
My daughter and my son, my children, really changed my life. And even though, like, my daughter is going to be 34. No, 32. I can't remember their ages. My son is going to be 36. Anyway, they have really impacted my life. The love I felt for them, the fun I had with them, the stress of raising them they're two people who have really impacted my life. Well, I guess just through the love that we exchanged, the love that I felt for them when they were babies, giving birth to them, raising them, nursing them, playing with them, dealing with their temper tantrums. How do they affect me? Now they're adults and they're wonderful people. So they're growing, they're living their lives, they work, they have jobs they really, really like. They're traveling the world. I raised them to be independent, and they're very independent. More than I would like at this point, because I wish they'd stayed in San Francisco. They've moved away. Oh, gosh. Well, I've learned a lot from my daughter, who is a lot braver than I was. She rock climbs, she teaches, she's doing a lot of things that I didn't do growing up. So, and she's, through her attitude, through her self-confidence, through her competence, she's a very competent young woman, and as is my son. I've learned to be more accepting of who I am through their acceptance of who they are in their own lives. I have people don't do this anymore. I have very old-fashioned photo albums that I started putting together when they were infants. So I have them on my shelf and I don't look at them that often. But sometimes I want to send them a picture of something in the albums, and I go through them and I look through them, and they're so cute. They are just adorable. It's such a history, a visual history of the day they were born, of their growing up, they're going to school, they're doing fun things. It's just, look, my mother did the same thing, and I look back at those albums. I do it a little bit differently because my mother threw the albums together, and they're not even in chronological order. And a lot of people are unidentified. I don't know who the heck are these people. I don't know who they are. Old relatives from the past, but I don't know who they are. So I make sure that I put the dates on the bottom of the pictures, maybe a little bit of what we were doing at that time. Oh, here's another thing that I did in terms of memorials. My friend Margie, who's in hospice, I made her an album. She's very active at Ruth's table. And we've had a whole bunch of birthday parties and different parties and pride parties and all kinds of fun events that she's been active in and helping to organize and helping to, volunteering to pour wine and stuff. And so I made her an album of all those pictures of our artworks through Ruth's table, through Monica Lee, Aiko Kunio, who have been our teachers, and the stuff that we've created in that space. That's a good question. I guess, however, the people who are remembering me, I'd like them to remember the good things about me. Maybe mention or remember the bad things about me and what they learned from that. I'd love to be memorialized in pictures. I'm an amateur photographer, so I've got a ton of pictures. So, what people do now, they have those slideshows.
Oh yeah.
And I had so many pictures of me when I was younger. So that would be fun. Do a slideshow. And remember all the fun times and remember the not so fun times and realize how growth happened through those difficult times. So not just hearts and flowers, but everything that makes a life. The good and the bad and the ugly and the beautiful and the inspirational, all of that. That is a human life throughout the millennia. How human beings evolved into what we are now, how our cultures evolved. It's amazing to think about what humans have done and what each individual person has done to add to the whole. I can cry.
My name is Euron, and I'm 19 years old. What is a memorial to me? It's a way of upholding somebody's legacy, their history, and what they've meant to you. Or I guess, in my personal opinion, what they mean to me. Well, how do I think a person could be memorialized? It depends, really. It can be in many different forms. Though, for me, I believe a person can be memorialized mainly through art, as a visual representation of perhaps the influence they've had over you, or the life they've lived, documented into a single piece, or multiple. Does my community or culture have any traditions of memorial? They do. For the art community, which I am a part of, we create structures and statues to honor a person. There's many different ways. We could also draw, paint them, It honestly depends. As for the African American community, that and art goes hand in hand, but mostly one of the more prominent examples I can think of are rallies and protests. And when they hold up signs, in case of tragedy or to honor somebody, and show what they're about. They love showing their support. We love showing our support through action instead of words. So I believe that is another way my community memorializes people. Somebody who's impacted my life, clear and cut, is my mother. She was really the only one who raised me from when my dad couldn't. So I owe her a lot. She's definitely somebody I would memorialize. She provided me with a comfortable life and everything necessary to succeed. Any problems that I've had, she's always been there to support me and help me get through them. To hold accountability and to control myself. I was really rowdy as a kid, very rough, specifically with kids my age and above. But she taught me to always learn how to, act with proper, respect, be responsible, and hold myself accountable for whenever I make mistakes. And so I carried that over into adulthood, and as I grow older, especially as an African American male, I see how those lessons can seriously apply to me, especially with certain situations under racism or discrimination or straight up stereotypes, how one mistake can really impact, or could really, how do I word this? Give people a certain impression about you, regardless if you care or not. A lot of the times, it's the public versus you. And however the public views you, ultimately will, quote-unquote, define you. Even if it doesn't accurately define you, as long as other people believe so, it will. So, learning how to be respectful, be responsible, control your actions and emotions, and act rationally is one lesson that I've, quite taken seriously for years. A lot of my video game setups, specifically my controller in our household, we do a lot of gaming, her, my little sister, and me. So whenever I think back to an object, I would think back to a PS4 or Xbox controller, or maybe a console, because that is the primary, factor or common factor between all of us, is that we're all gamers in our household. I don't believe she really had a favorite video game, but one thing I remember her playing a lot often at times where I'd say, there was The Sims, and then right now she plays a lot of Fortnite. She alternated through games. She loved exploring different types of games and gaming genres, and she played a lot of them all. So it's really hard to say which one was her favorite, because she was always going through from game to game, completing them, going through them. So I believe just, games in general are just her favorite thing to do. It's really broad, I know, but that's just how it is with her. How do I hold those memories? That's a good question. I don't really particularly do anything too much to hold those memories, because they're always with me. Although I guess they resurface back when I'm having a hard time, or maybe going through something stressful, and then I need an escape. I go back to video games and I reminisce on the times where, me and my mom would enjoy playing video games together, or when I was a kid and I used to watch her play video games at night before I go to bed. So those are the times I typically reminisce about. That really helps. I like to play a lot of fighting games, and mostly in my art I like to depict a lot of dynamicism or dynamics, fluid motion, and action. So I believe that was a heavy influence for me, along with a lot of anime games. So that's about how far that correlation goes. That's a good question. How would I want to be remembered? I guess, I've given it some thought before, but there's just so much I always thought about. But one thing I always came down to is remembering. I want to be remembered for what my art, or my opinion of art, stands for, my definition of it. I believe art should be used to express yourself in many different ways that your words never could. To be able to depict what you are thinking visually, because a lot of people, including myself at one point, really struggled to be able to communicate what we thought. And so art was a good way to express that, regardless of what it may be. it doesn't matter. As long as you can use that medium to express yourself fully, tactfully, I believe that's what I would want to be remembered by. The way I define art in my eyes. It'd be pretty simple, but it'd be a hand holding up a pencil, right? And the meaning behind that is that would be the start of your journey. So, picking up that pencil for the first time, regardless of your own skill level, shouldn't really matter in the end. What should matter is if you want to depict something that you have bottled up in your mind, do it. Don't let your ideas just wither away.
Paul L. Roberts, 83 years old. I would think that Martin Luther King would be one, and Jackie Robinson would be one. Two. I think that Jackie Robinson, they do one day a year, they play the number 42. And the reason that Jackie Robinson, he broke barriers for black people. And a lot of people don't realize that he did that. And that's why he should be talked about.
Mm-hmm. And then, how do you think Martin Luther King Jr.?
He should have some statues, and they have put up a day for him who somebody is trying to knock it down. We know who that is.
Yeah.
You think one day is enough for, let's just say, Jackie?
He's doing good to get that one day. We live in white America, and if you don't think so, you got a problem. My father taught me a trade, which I could go most any place in the world and practice my trade. It's wood, which is a great thing to have a trade. I do hardwood floors. My father taught me how to do hardwood floors. When I was in business, he taught me to always have a white man working for you because that's who they think runs the business. Good and bad. I mean, he did some good things for me, he did some bad things for me, which happens with all father-son relationships. As a caring, equalizing type person, I don't look at people, color, this and that. I look at people who they are and what they are about. I think more should be taught in school about Martin Luther King. Many people don't even know who Martin Luther King is. Mm-hmm. And the things that he stood for and what he said. Mm-hmm. They've never heard his speech, and they're not teaching that kind of stuff in schools. They're dumbing kids down, actually dumbing them down. So if you can't read, how can you read the Constitution? So you don't know what it says. You only know what somebody tells you what it said, what it's about. One of the values was his great speech. He said that people will be thought none of the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I think that's a great thing. That kids today are really messed up in the head. They got the phone that tells them everything. They're beginning to not know how to think. My thing was able to make me a good living, which a lot of people don't have. Just because you go to college doesn't mean that you're going to get a good job. I've always been the boss. And that makes a whole lot of difference. I look at things very differently. You go to work to get the job done, not thinking about your hourly pay, but what you're going to get paid for the job, for what you know.
And where were you doing flooring? In the Bay Area and beyond?
In the Midwest, in very affluent communities, when hardwood floors was very big in the 50s and 60s and 70s, I had some basic skills that a lot of people just don't have. I could match stain. I was good at it. And you get paid for being good at something. Fairly good. I'm a person that kind of keeps to himself, stay in my lane, do what works for me, and don't allow other people to get in my head.
Yeah.
For instance, in this building, how many black people in this building? One. The Chinese people know how to say hi and bye, and that didn't bother me. I'm happy with where I am. I was in Kansas City, and it affected me, but I knew not to let it get too out of hand, because this is still white America, especially more so there then. They were having riots and all kind of stuff. That was very unfair But this is the country we live in, and you have to accept it and learn how to work within the system. Otherwise, it'll chew you up and spit you out.
You know?
I hadn't really thought about it, but I'll give you a thought that a lot of people don't know. The man died from a broken heart
How come?
of how he was treated. He was spit on, all kind of bad stuff. And he up and went up in it. Concerning Jackie, this is just not Jackie, but this is basically a lot of black people that do great things in America. Once they do them, they're forgotten. Like Jesse Owens, he was forgotten. And as soon as he's forgotten, later, 50 years later, they want to give it to his grandkids, but he didn't get any recognition. Jesse Owens' final job was being a janitor at Ohio State after all he'd done for this country and Ohio State. That's not thought about.
Yeah.
I think about these kind of things, but I don't let it bother me because all it would do would upset me. Like I say, I'm always going to be a different drummer, always have, and don't think about what other people are thinking. That's their problem, not mine. I'll make a real heavy statement that a girl said one time, a teenager. We don't have any schools in this country named after who was the great, I can't think of his name, They have schools named after Robert E. Lee. We don't have schools named after Benedict Arnold. But we have schools named after Robert E. Lee. And we all know who Benedict Arnold was. We all know who Robert E. Lee was.
My name's Claribel, and I'm 16 years old. A memorial to me is just something that can evoke a certain emotion or that has a type of history to one person or a community of people. I think a person could be memorialized in many different ways. I think it's all just about how the people thought about that person. I think it could be like physical, like a statue. It could be like a place, or it could just be as simple as like a drawing or something. For my Mexican culture, usually Dia de los Muertos, which is Day of the Dead. It's like a day where we kind of memorialize the dead and we make altars, and we have this specific type of flower. I forgot what it's called, but it's basically so that we can remember the dead, and just we set out like bread and food so they could eat. That means to me it's kind of like remembering just the past, but not in a regretful way. It's a celebration in the end. Like people throw parades, and it's like it's a bit sad, but it's also a good way of just being like in the moment and accepting that some people aren't coming back, but you can still remember them. Someone who has impacted my life, I think definitely my aunt on my mom's side. She's been like a really big support to me, and she's also just generally like really funny and very like honest with me from a young age, which was really nice. Well, she impacted my life by being there. A lot of the time, she was the definition of the cool aunt, and she really like, if I wanted to do something, she was like, yeah, you do it. So she was just always there ever since I was a little kid. So she really helped me out with just like general support, I feel like. I think I definitely learned a lot of confidence, and I also learned to stand up for myself, because she would always, she wouldn't take anything. Like if I ever mentioned to her if I was getting bullied, she would like be like, if they talk to you again, then I'm going to go in there and talk to the principal. And I just thought she was joking, but she did it one day. So she really taught me like to not take anything, and that like I matter. So I think really helped with confidence and just like, being aware of like myself. Some things that definitely remind me is, it might sound a bit off, but she was a swing instructor, and there's this like small pool, and just whenever I enter like any pool, it's not even because my memory is like so fuzzy, so like any pool and I like smell that smell of chlorine or whatever, or after I get hungry and I eat like an ice cream, it really reminds me of her, because she always took me swimming while she was teaching the class. So I think just pools. I kind of hold them by, well, not only like the obvious, like talking to her and visiting her every now and then, but also just like talking to her about other people, like talking, like whenever someone asked me, or just I was like, oh yeah, I remember that. My aunt, I just mention her a lot in like conversation if it happens to come up. I just feel like I just want people to know like how good of a person she was. So that's like one way that I do it. I think I want to be remembered, I don't know, as like someone who like really did do everything. I don't know, like someone who put in the effort, who really tried. And I think it would definitely be nice to just be remembered even like generations after. Like those like wild stories you hear about like your great grandpa or something. So that would definitely be nice.
Okay, my name is Victoria Bruckner. My middle name is Thornton. That was my maiden name. I am 73. I was born in 1951. And that's the beginning, I guess. A memorial, something you remember and something you honor, and hopefully something that guides you in life, if it's something you really honor, or a person that you honor, or a political movement that you honor, and you want to remember and continue. I think through your actions, through your thoughts, maybe through art, through ideas that the person had that you want to either carry on or use them to as an impetus for new ideas of your own, or an art form the person loved, or a philosophy they loved that you want to carry on. Oh, I've always had one foot or one finger in several different worlds. So if you say my community, there's the disability community. I was born with my disability. The disability community, in the sense that we mean it politically, came to be in the late 60s and early 70s. I consider myself part of that community, but I also consider myself part of other communities. My family includes people of 3 different religions and 3 different races. So since all of those people and all of those backgrounds are part of my family, I consider myself members of those communities as well. Let me put it this way. I don't feel at home anywhere where everybody's white, even though I'm white. Okay. I don't feel at home where nobody has a disability. I don't feel at home where everybody has a disability because I move in different worlds. As I've aged, I've experienced more and more mobility limitations because of my disability, and so I am more segregated than I was in most of my adult life. I began in my childhood being very segregated because of my disability. So one of my values that I'd like to memorialize, well, 2 of them, are social equality and integration. And I feel like those are going out of fashion, and it scares the hell out of me. Because we will never learn to communicate and have empathy with each other if we're not rubbing elbows and shoulders with people who are different than us. And, Zoom helps, outreach online and FaceTime and all of that help. But there's nothing like working together or commuting together or just being together as people. And I see that going away. I see people receding into their own specific communities and then not learning about others and not understanding others. And that tendency frightens me. Maybe it shouldn't. Maybe there's good things about it. But I see a lot of the progress that my generation and my parents' generation and my grandparents' generation, so taking us back to the beginning of the 20th century, going away. And I'd like to memorialize the sense of that we can come together with our differences and have creative ideas and do better and understand each other better. In fact, a lot of my work when I was working, I'm retired now, was around communication, group communication, teaching. I was also a therapist, a psychotherapist, a family therapist. And I just see people understanding each other less and less and looking to voices online that are the loudest for whatever reason. Maybe they're an influencer, maybe they're your peer, maybe it's somebody you agree with politically, maybe it's some newscaster that just takes your attention away from what the people that are around you and interacting with you day to day. And I think this tendency makes people afraid. It makes people afraid to talk together, to share together, to actually show up together and learn from each other. And I mourn that, and I want that to be not only memorialized, but acted on in the future. People carrying that forward.
Who would be that person?
Well, I wouldn't say there's any one person, but I'd say it's a group of people in the disability rights movement. My generation of that movement is passing away. A lot of the greats have already died. And what I would recommend is you watch a movie called Crip Camp. It's available. It will teach you a lot about what people faced, the kinds of strategies they developed to survive and support each other in a society that basically ignored them and was hostile in the guise of helping, which is always a very confusing message. Look out for confusing messages. Try to figure out what's behind them. I'd say remember that. But there's like a group of maybe a dozen leaders. I would like to see maybe in some sculpture of all of them standing and sitting together that created a lot of what we have now. This country, if we don't take it apart, has the most accessible physical infrastructure in the world. Okay. I've traveled, I've taught in other countries where they have excellent accessibility standards for architecture, indoor and outdoor, but they're voluntary. We're the only country that made it the law, that put it in our building codes. And it scares the heavens out of me that some of the quote-unquote progressive people in Sacramento are wanting to scale back things like environmental review standards like CEQA. They've found legal ways to skirt the obligations they have, some of the obligations they have under the Americans with Disabilities Act to create accessible environments, either physically or communicatively, because it's expensive, right? So they're trying to loosen and weaken laws that are meant to protect us in the guise of being progressive. So again, watch out for the confusing messages. I think about what happened, I think it was in DC, when they finally put up a statue of Franklin Roosevelt seated in his wheelchair. Because all those films and photos of him standing up in braces it wasn't what he really had to face. I mean, he wore the braces to stand at a podium with other people's assistance. But when he was living his life, he was sitting down. And this statue showed him that way. And it only happened after enough people with disabilities called him out. I also wore leg braces for 14 years growing up. And I grew up in an environment where there were no lifts on buses. There were way fewer elevators in buildings. And sometimes in a building, you'd go up some steps to the entrance, and then there'd be an elevator inside. And what was the point of that if you couldn't climb steps? So everywhere we went, it was like my parents would say, oh, can we take her? What if she can't walk in those braces? Where can we park the car so it's not a far distance? So, or do we have to carry her? What do we have to do? And people forget, even younger disabled people take this infrastructure that we have for granted. It took us decades of pushing for it. Anytime you go down a curb ramp, whether it's on your skateboard, whether you're pushing a baby stroller, whether you have a dolly and you're delivering boxes, or whether you just want to avoid stepping off a curb and maybe slipping and breaking your ankle, that was us. And we fought for decades to get city by city, cities to install curb ramps. Now, of course, it's federal law. But watch out for the people who want to weaken federal law, including all the civil rights laws. I mean, when I was growing up as a child, I grew up in New York and then mostly LA, and then I came here in my early 20s. We could still see on TV all the segregation, all the separate but not equal bathrooms and drinking fountains, all those marches with the dogs and the hoses and the cops. We saw them. We know that's part of this country. And we know that it's not all of this country, and we know we're better than that. And if there was anything the civil rights movement taught people with disabilities, and women of all races, it was strategies for resisting that kind of forced oppression, segregation. It's gonna be a fight. I'm so sad that it is, because I felt like we had made so much progress. And I think we want to memorialize the progress we made. I used to think, before they closed JFK Drive, which I think was equivalent to redlining Golden Gate Park, really. And people are too, not you particularly, but many people, and especially people who benefit from the closing of that road, are too young to remember what redlining was. I remember in 1965, I think it was, there was a bill called the Rumford Fair Housing Act that actually had been passed that made illegal some of those unfair housing practices that we're using to segregate neighborhoods and areas. And there was a campaign funded largely by the real estate industry to repeal that law. And my sister was working for a realtor, and he ordered her to mail out brochures in favor of repealing the law. And she said, no, I won't do that. So he fired her for insubordination, and she lost her job. She wasn't even particularly political, but it was so clear to her that this was the wrong thing to do, that she was willing to lose that job and go look for another job. And I think that's what people have to have, is an inner commitment to values of equality and fairness, which have really gone away with this worship of the ultra wealthy and the libertarianism. Liberty is a great thing, but when you have a society, if your liberty means stepping on somebody else's toes, you have to have limitations somewhere so that things are fair. And that's really important to me. I think fairness would be something I would want to memorialize. Well, the way I see it, and the way I've seen it happening the most, is with architecture. If you go to Crissy Field now, or you go to that whole area, you'll see drinking fountains at 3 levels. One for adults who are standing, one for wheelchair users, that kids are, it's also the right height for kids, and one really down low to the ground, which is not mandated by law by any means, for dogs. And you, in that same area, you find that people can get there by car, they can get there by bus, they can get there by bicycle, they can get there on foot. There are all different ways to reach. Things aren't closed off for these people only, you know? And I think it's the wealthy that wanted that back and clawed it back. And we have to change it back again. Because honestly, in terms of what makes a society work, they don't know what they're doing. They see things that are to their advantage, and they don't realize the larger picture of what it does to the whole society. And you need to keep that society in mind. So I think the Statue of Liberty is great. I think there should be more statues of people who really fought for liberation, for equality.
My name is Banneker, and I'm 16 at the end of the month. A memorial is something that humans make to declare their existence. Something that can last beyond, one's life or a civilization's existence. Like the pyramids are a lot of other ancient kind of monuments. I think it's a very human thing to do, to try to last forever, make something that will last forever. I think a person could be memorialized through what they do, the relationships they make with other people, and making some sort of kind or interesting impact on the world around them. I think you have to do something special or nice or specific to kind of be memorialized or have people care. The one thing that comes to mind is my dad's from the South, and I think he's black and from the South, and I'm mixed, and I think the food and some of that culture is part of people trying to memorialize themselves. And I've had good Southern food, and I also feel over there I've spent a month or two living in North Carolina and visiting my dad, and I do feel I want to memorialize, and there's also some generational trauma that doesn't need to be memorialized. It needs to be recognized, and then so I'd say my parents first. They teach you really, in your core, make you the person who you are, and then you can take over eventually and learn about other people the artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, who I think was a trailblazer in I've read a lot of things about him, and a lot of people just called him a black artist, this and that, really put him in that corner, but I think he was more than that, and especially made free art, free in he worked fast or worked slow, didn't like you look at it and there's a lot of things going on, and I'm inspired by that, and doing kind of like free art, and yeah, again, like not like free art giving it away, but like spiritually, like you're not meticulously trying to do anything, you're not like working, like you're not like beating yourself up over it, you're just expressing yourself and just going. Well, my dad introduced me to a lot of like pop culture, and things like that, and I think I eventually found my own like pop culture interest, but he showed me like Star Wars and Marvel movies, and just like cinema, like he showed me a lot of movies in general. And my mom, I was like a C-section baby, and she didn't like how the doctors like framed everything and like treated her kind of, and it was a very like threatening, like controlling situation. And so then she kind of said like, I'm gonna dedicate like my parenting to you is to like make you free and fight for your like freedom. And so I appreciate that, and I try to like keep that going. And yeah, to observe, to trust your gut, maybe. Trying to think of like anything like really like a specific good lesson that I maybe thought of or like talked to either one of my parents about recently. To think about like you kind of exist in your own world, and just I think a lot of observation skills are like what I've learned, like to observe what's going on in yourself and your body and like outward and like other people, and like trusting yourself in certain situations, or like thinking it through more. No, and I would say no, because I also think that's something that they've taught me not to value. Like I think it's more free to like rely on like yourself and your memory and your like love for people or them, instead of like putting it all in like one object. And you'll like see in like media and stuff, it's just very much like, oh no, you know, they broke the pot and that was my grandma's favorite pot and now everything is over and I lost her basically, and that's not true. Like you still love her and have your memory of your grandma, and it isn't about like one object. I think, you know, you hold your memories very dearly. Like one thing I think about a lot is like, you know, growing up and like I'm not gonna be this age forever, and it's such a like weird slow burn, and you know, it still feels like I could have been 11 yesterday, but I hold, you know, like a lot of memories of my parents and just nostalgia, I feel, because when you don't grow up in the same place forever, like I know a lot of people like grow up in like a family home or something, and I haven't, you know, because we live in the Bay Area, and I think I like break up memories and like sections and like parts of your life and just carry like nostalgia for it, and that's one thing I've kind of like been relating to people or like exploring like here in like making friends.
My name is Bill, my last name is Bruckner, and my age is 75. A memorial is a way that we honor and recognize something in either our lives or someone else's life that is important and significant, has had an impact. They can be memorialized with a sculpture of themselves, of course, with something that was said, that they said or was said about them. It can be an object that represents some aspect of who they are or what they did or what they accomplished or how they impacted other people. Well, I belong to a lot of different cultures and communities. So I mean, the first one that occurs to me, which is really unusual because I hadn't thought about it before. So I grew up Jewish, and I had lots of relatives who were killed by the Nazis during the Holocaust. So certainly there are a lot of memorials in terms of remembering people who were in concentration camps. I've never visited any of those and have no desire to visit them. And also, like when you go to cities in Europe, Vicki and I had a business, my wife Vicki and I had a business for 25 years where we did a lot of work overseas. And when we'd go to cities in Europe, a number of cities have Holocaust memorials. There's even a Holocaust memorial over by the Legion of Honor in San Francisco, done by an artist. His last name is Siegel. I can't remember his first name right now. So that's the first thing that came to mind in terms of a cultural memorial. I think of myself more these days as a member of the Earth community. So I don't really, I mean, certainly one of my identities is being a person with a disability. That's a very important part of my identity. I don't know if it's a cultural identity, but it's an important part of my identity. And when I think of people to memorialize, I think of some of the people who were leaders in our movement who have passed away, some of them quite recently. I think we're all part of this planet, you know, regardless of color of a person's skin or their religion or their cultural identities or where they came from or whether they're rich or poor. We're all part of this planet, for good or for bad. I mean, unfortunately, so many people on this planet are really suffering because there's so much unequal distribution of money and resources. I'm not a big fan of capitalism, but I'm living in a capitalist country, and even if I'm not a big fan of capitalism, I benefit from capitalism. So there's so much unequal distribution of everything. It's not new. If you read history, it's always been that way. It just seems to be, because this is the time I'm alive in, and this is a time we're all alive in, this is what we know, but it's always been unequal. It's always been people who had a lot and other people who had very little, who were indebted to those people, or slaves or servants or indentured servants. So we've always had, but I like to think of myself as a member of this community.
Yeah.
And you know, the four of you all are different, all have different backgrounds and different experiences, and are probably as equally interesting as mine, though they're shorter in many ways. So that's what I mean by a member of the Earth community. My uncle's going to be 102 in 3 weeks, and he's still a practicing sculptor. He's an artist who lives outside of Chicago, who lived by him. I mean, he was, you know, had been married and stuff, but he lived by himself for the last 30 years of his life, and until about 4 or 5 years ago lived in his own apartment, but now lives in a combination, just senior housing and assisted living facility, so he gets some assistance. And he still goes to a studio once a week and does his sculpture. Well, my very first memory that I have is him coming when I lived in the Bronx as a child, him coming to our apartment, and my sister and I shared a bedroom, and we had we had a blackboard, and he would draw these little cartoon characters, and I'd get up on my tippy toes and copy his cartoons. Now, I've told that story so many times that I'm wondering if I don't remember it, but just saw pictures of it, and so I've internalized it, and so I think I remember it, but I actually just remember the pictures. And I think that's something that happens to all of us, is that when we hear stories or see things, and we tell them enough time, and as we're telling them, we're seeing those images in our brains, that they become animated or alive. So we think that they happened So I tell this, but I really realize I have no idea if I really remember it or not.
Yeah.
The person who's memorializing, like if you memorialize someone, versus whatever you create as your piece to represent that person, how someone sees that, and it means something completely, it doesn't have that sort of resonance because it's not someone who they had contact with. I mean, even just everything about Ruth Asawa. I mean, the people who knew Ruth Asawa knew Ruth. Never met Ruth Asawa. They had a living experience with Ruth Asawa. For all the rest of us, just see her work and hear about her and imagine who she was and have images of who she was. But she was actually, very complicated, I'm sure, very multi-dimensional person. A mother who sometimes her kids loved her and sometimes her kids hated her, and all of those things. So, well, he's been my mentor, my art mentor, my entire life. Even today, he'll send me images of his sculpture that he's doing, and we'll critique them over the phone. He lives outside of Chicago, and I'll send him images of my work, and he'll critique my work. The best compliment I got starting about 10 years ago. He said, "You're really a better artist than I am." And I said, "Well, that's the best compliment I could get, Bertie." And the truth is, at this point, I probably am. So yeah, he's always been a great person to look at my work and to critique my work. I've had lots of other people critique my work as well, but that's the one that goes back to, being I'm sure he looked at my drawings, when I was a little kid. So I'm primarily a painter. I do a lot of drawing. What I say to people is, if you want to see the work that I do, you should go to my website, and I have 6 different albums or portfolios. And, when you've lived a long time, your work, you have lots of series of work. Like I was just showing some stuff. I belong to an online group of senior artists, and we meet once a month, and we had our Zoom meeting last night, and we all show 3 pieces, and I was showing these 3 pieces. And this one guy said, I went to your website recently, Bill, and your work is so different than it was in some of the stuff on your website. How did it change that way? And I said to him, well, when you've been around for a while, even Picasso started out as a real representational artist. When he was 12 years old, he did these beautiful portraits of people. Look what he became. So, and including doing sculpture and then doing ceramics. And so yeah, I draw and paint, but I do also a lot of mixed media. I do a lot of things with collage these days.
Yeah.
I do a lot of abstracts these days, but I'm primarily a representational artist. So my uncle has been doing this whole series for, 25 years now, of sculpture of needles, of sewing needles. And it's because my grandparents, his parents, were both, my grandmother was a seamstress and my grandfather was a tailor. So they made their livings working in a sweatshop, making clothing for people. Where you do just back in the days, you would just do one thing, like maybe the pockets or the sleeves or, whatever. So they each worked in a sweatshop. And I guess starting about 25 years ago, he started to think about his parents. And he started to do all these sculptures. He does them he's done them out of bronze, he's done them out of silver, he's done them out of cloth, he's done them out of clay, he's done them out of wood. He's done them out of fiber. He's done some that are actual size. He's never done anything that small, like a needle. Sometimes he just does the eye of the needle. Sometimes he does the whole needle. He does them configured with other things, with thimbles. Do you know what a thimble is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little.
So, yeah, I think I would memorialize him with a needle, maybe a thimble. So he went to art school. He has an interesting life. He went to art school in Cleveland, which is where my mother and Bernie grew up. And so he went to high school, and this was like the time of the Depression. So he needed to think about what he could do to make a living. And he was really talented, so he went to art school to study industrial design, not to become a fine artist, but to do something that, quote unquote, was practical, he could make a living. And when he was 19 or 20, the war started. The war had started. And I think it was 1942, so he was like 20 years old. There was an ad, there was a poster at the Cleveland Art Institute that said, the Army is looking for artists for a special project. And he knew he was about to be drafted. And he thought, I don't want to end up as an infantryman and shot. Maybe I should find out about this program. So he signed up, and it ended up being, and it's only been released because it was all, had to be released through the Freedom of Information Act because it was top secret. He became part of this group called the Ghost Army. And the Ghost Army went over to Europe right after Normandy. And it was comprised of artists, sound technicians, and engineers. And what they did is the artists would blow up, they'd make these tanks out of rubber, and then they would blow them up with hand pumps, like a bicycle pump. Airplanes and tanks. The sound engineers were doing things like creating, as you heard, all these people gathering around for formation, or huge numbers of troops, right? And the engineers were doing things where creating all kinds of other kind of sound effects. So the idea was to confuse the German army about where the real soldiers were. I said, well, that was pretty risky. He said, yeah, we were shot at a few times because they really thought that this was a real army. And anyway, it was never, and he never told anyone about it. He was sworn to secrecy. And there were some famous artists who were in his group. And but then about 20 years ago, it was released, and some guy wrote a book about it. They made a movie about it that was on public broadcasting, PBS. You can find it. It's called The Ghost Army. And it's a really interesting story. And anyway, so he did that, and then he came back from the war, and then he worked as an industrial designer for all of his adult life. And then when he was about 65 and retired, he said, I never really have done fine arts. And so he started to take life drawing, figure drawing, where there's models, and then he signed up. There was a community college, sort of like City College, that had all these art classes near where he lived. And he took every class imaginable, everything, printmaking, weaving, everything. And when he was 101, they gave him an honorary degree at the graduation. And actually the professor of the college said, we have our youngest student here who's 15, who's graduating with an AA degree, and our oldest student who's graduating with an honorary AA degree. And the reason they gave him, and I said to Bernie, why are they giving you an honorary and not a regular degree? He said, no. He said, it's because you didn't take all the other courses. You didn't take, math and science and history and language. And they can give you a real AA. Well, I have some of his sculpture, so I see it every day. I just think of him a lot. I just called him a few days ago. Mm-hmm. He's still very, very coherent, very sharp. He's really sharp. So I hold on to the memories in a living way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to his funeral because I really don't need to participate when he dies. Assuming that I'm alive, if he dies, when he dies. I've been to his birthday celebrations, his big ones, 90th and 100th and stuff. And I'd rather just remember him. I think going to funerals is really for the living, and I don't need to see other people to chat about Bernie. I can remember him myself.
I'm Lyla, I'm 16. To me, a memorial is something that symbolizes an important person or place or event, and it helps show why that thing was important and how it affects us today. I think a person can be memorialized obviously through your own personal memories, but then also through things they left behind, like art they created, music, honestly just like keeping them in conversation even if they're like passed on. I think in my family, a tradition of memorial is to just try to keep someone or something that we want to remember like in our conversations, and if we have like a certain place that means something to us, we'll try to visit it a lot, or like just like think about the person, pray about them, stuff like that. I would say someone that's impacted my life a lot, well, both of my parents, because they're like role models for me in their values, and then my grandma, because also she's a role model for me in her values, and she just took a lot of time to like get to know me as a person, and that was really impactful to me. They're very thoughtful, courageous. Other values that make them important are, I think they're hope. They have hope for the future, and they're always like trying to find a good solution for whatever's going on in your life. They're good listeners. Yeah, I mean, I think like when my grandma passed, our whole family had to be like courageous and hopeful because it was a really hard time. And so just having my parents to like talk to, and like other family members that were there for me, was really impactful to me. The way they impacted me was to like inspire me to be a better person and like follow their morals in my life with my friends, like try to show my friends how to be a better person also. And yeah, they inspired a lot of the things that I like to do, like the places I like to go. Well, I like to do road trips a lot. My grandma liked to do road trips. My family does a lot of road trips. And we just also really like going to the beach, so yeah. So my grandma, her name was Rosie, so definitely a rose. We visited, it was really funny, we were on one of our trips, and we went to A&W, so I don't know, like root beer floats remind me of her, and yeah. I think the beach is more like just my family, my like immediate family. We live really close to the beach, and we have a dog, so we had to take him to the beach a lot, and we like do cold plunges together and stuff like that, so that's kind of like more my immediate. Like I said earlier, we just try to like keep them in our conversations, remember them, do stuff that they liked, or like talk about, oh, do you remember when this happened this one time, and just try to keep their memory alive through that, or like just kind of like talking about it and keeping the memory alive. I just want to be remembered as like a impactful person in people's lives, and I hope that I can like help people like become better by like, you know, being there for them, and like I also want to be remembered for like my art and like my personality and my like it's like stuff like the beach. I hope like people can think of me when they go to the beach and stuff like that. Of me, a monument of me. I think maybe it would be me like diving into the water or something like that. I don't know how I would incorporate art into that, but maybe like, I don't know, maybe I'd be like painting like a beach or something like that. It would definitely, there would be a lot of roses, definitely. I don't know, it would just, maybe her sitting at the piano or something like that, it would feel really like loving, comforting. Yeah, she had a big piano in her house, yeah.
Sure, my name is Kim Randolph, and I'm 67 years old. I believe that memorials can be useful, for sure. I mean, history has its place. But at the same time, I think that when people focus too much on the past, then they miss opportunities to create the changes in the world that they want to see, because nothing stays the same. There are lots of people who are upset because the world's changing faster than it ever has been, because of technology and because of the globalization of the human population. People are moving everywhere. You have people who are tribal folks who are working on their tribal lands, trying to stay connected to their cultures, and you have people who are talking about putting folks on Mars, and it's all going on at the same time. That's what's fascinating. I left Ohio before I physically left Ohio because everything starts in the mind. With the feeling that I didn't belong there. I left there in 1986. I play lyre, I play folk harp, I play various bamboo flutes, I play different types of percussion, hand percussion. All of them are folk instruments. And the reason I play folk instruments as opposed to like the silver flute or the standard, I don't have room for a concert harp. It's huge. The reason I started playing folk instruments is many years ago now, a few years ago, I opened to my intuition and it came to me. See, when you open to your intuition as an artist of any kind, you will get inspirations or information about things that have no logical, they don't come from your mind. It doesn't, when people paint, they're not thinking. They're channeling their creativity through that. And that's how things come into being. We open to it because everything humans have ever done, ever will do, is already there. All we have to do is tune to it, and it will come to you. So I had no background in this particular type of string instrument, but something said, I'm going to buy one of those. And I bought one, and I liked it. And now what I do is I call the kind of music I play on the lyre and the harp, I call it, sort of almost harking back to the Greeks, I call it sonic poetry, because I don't play songs, not in the conventional sense. If you imagine a small harp, I use my fingers in various rhythmic patterns, using the different tones and notes and silences and whatnot to create beautiful sounds. And that is the way originally the harp was played, or the lyre was played. Some of them have like 7 strings, 10 strings. It's not the harp. The lute harp that I have has 22 strings, but it only corresponds to the white keys on the piano. So, and the more limited the instrument, the more you have to go deeply within yourself to create something novel. Oh, well, I do a lot of things. I am involved in Ruth's Table. I spend a lot of time at various art galleries, yoga studios, Adobe Books, which is a very community-centered bookstore, a shameless plug, on 24th Street in the Mission here. They call it the living room of the Mission. You can go there to hang out. It's a bookstore. It's a place to meet people. There are lots of things to get. They have a gallery in the back. They also have various types of groups that meet there, anything from groups that meet for people who have substance abuse issues or something like that, and they also have draw night, and they had book clubs and all kinds of stuff that goes on there. So it's a community hub itself. I've also noticed that when I first came here, there were a lot of cafes. And before the internet, people would go to all these cafes. There used to be a bunch of them everywhere. And you'd meet your friends there, and you could stay there all afternoon drinking coffee or whatever and hang out, meet people, your friends, people in the neighborhood. You'd go to restaurants, and they were places that you went to all the time, and the owners of the restaurants knew who you were. They would call you by name if you exchange names. You want the same thing? Yeah, I'll have the same thing. You know what I get. That kind of stuff. But things changed, and now you go into some restaurants, it's just you're just a customer. Cafes, you're just a customer. They ring you up, give you whatever it is you bought, and thank you for coming, and that's it. But there are some folks who are still interested in that kind of community building where you get to know your neighbors. On the corner of near 16th and Valencia, where there's a bar there now, sports bar, and there's a place called Cream, which is an ice cream shop. There was a place there before called Tiku, and it was run by a woman named Sylvie Lemaire. She was from France, and she was the most beautiful, sweetest person you could ever meet. Her restaurant went under, and I remember watching it, and I've seen this a few times, when things are changing and the owner of the business has not really kept up. Went from a thriving business to slowly, fewer customers, trying to figure out, like if they had a full, like Sylvie had a full alcohol license, which is very expensive, because she started out with the beer and wine and then went to alcohol. Then she went back down to beer and wine because she couldn't afford it. She started doing, and this was a community place. People would eat there. She had the most delicious crepes. And started to realize that she things were changing. So she went down to beer and wine, and then she started to cut her hours. She started, well, first she was like having breakfast. When they didn't have breakfast, they had lunch and dinner. Didn't work. Then she started reducing the number of hours they were open, the days they were open. And some of her employees who loved her started to, cut their salaries so that they could try to stay open. But eventually it closed. And it was a big blow to the community because people loved her. She told me, because I used to talk with her, that she used to own, in France, she owned a motorcycle business. And she came here and opened up this creperie called Tiku. And it was very much, she was from Breton, so it was a very unique creperie, because at one time crepes were really hot, really popular. And one day after the restaurant had closed, and it had been closed for a long time, because people said she went back to France. And I saw, how they put out the candles with the flowers all around and the pictures, and I saw one near the restaurant where it used to be, and I'm like, oh my God, what's that about? So I went over, and it was a memorial for Sylvie because she took her life. She went back to France, and I don't know what happened. We heard it through the grapevine that she ended her life. She was 60 years old, and that was a big blow. I don't know if she had a health issue, if it was financial, but when people end their lives, it's because they feel their back is against the wall and they don't see a way out. That's often the case. And they feel like the only way out is out of this life. And that's what she did. And there was a big write-up about her in Mission Local. So I don't know if that answers the question exactly. But yeah, there are different restaurants people would go to where, what is that over there on, near Guerrero? No, it's, hold on. There's a cafe at 18th and, Dolores Park Cafe. That used to be a place called Real Good Karma a long time ago. And it was kind of a hippie restaurant where they sold brown rice and tofu and stuff like, because that stuff was really big too. Back in the day when health food businesses were out, there were so many things that people used to do that are now common knowledge that used to be considered strange. Like all this vegan stuff. People were trying to do that 30 years ago, but it was weird to the average American. I know my family used to give me grief about it because I was involved in something called macrobiotic diet, which was, there were lots of books on it. And it was talking about the American diet and how people are becoming sick because of eating the SAD diet, standard American diet, which is a lot of junk food and all of that. That's another topic. But a lot of things, people eat healthier now, but a lot of these things were formulating in the what we call the past, because that's another topic. And now many things are very common, like organic food and the availability of it and all that sort of thing. So community, there are lots of communities around a lot of different issues. People build community around their common understanding about health. You know, people are involved in health clubs, and recently I went out to check out a couple of gyms, and that's a community. So there are all kinds of places and people build communities. Yes, here's how I think, because I'm a musician, and I started out many years ago when I was a kid. I picked up the guitar and the violin and all these other different instruments that I tried playing. And we're always playing the repertoire of dead people. When you go to study music in the conservatory, you're going to study the music of Bach and Beethoven and a whole bunch of dead folks. Same thing when you go to the museums. You're going to see the artwork of a whole bunch of dead folks. Oh, that's great, really. But there are absolutely amazing people who are alive today, everywhere, who are doing incredible things. And many of them are innovators, because every single one of the people in the museums and every single one of the people whose work we study in school was once upon a time an innovator. Everything that becomes the standard practice, becomes an institution, was once upon a time somebody who broke a mold. That's why they're great. Bach, when you go to listen to Bach at the symphony, all of the musicians are reading music on a page. And none of them will deviate from that because of how they're trained. People who are innovators and improvisers, which I am, look to discover ways to vary a theme. There were lots of jazz musicians, some of whom were not understood at their time. They would play music that was atonal, that was, and they respected the folks who came before them, but they were not interested in staying within the conventional genre. And their peers thought they were crazy. Anybody who's ever done anything, people thought they were crazy at first. Like you look at the Beatles, what we call classic rock. A lot of those people were innovators in their day, and they wore clothing that was different. They took off clothing. They, many of them, like David Bowie, was and Prince. All of these people did things with respect to the past, because Prince definitely was very steeped in the blues. So was Jimi Hendrix, but they pushed past those boundaries. They weren't trying to hold on to something to such a degree that they became calcified. So my interest in, if anything, in considering the past is how can we look at something that was once the way things were and move past them to envision how we want them to be. Because everything comes from a vision in the mind. Reimagining. And in the art classes we do here, repurposing is very popular because people, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You could take something that already exists and tweak it by just a tiny bit, and that alone is enough to revolutionize something. Well, that's a good question, because from what I've understood, a lot of young folks feel hopeless because they don't have any mentorship, or maybe somebody told them they should have a mentor or whatever. I can't imagine what it's like to be 18, 16, 17, even 20-something, 30 or 40. I have no idea, because I was a person who, all of my life, I listened to my intuition, and I didn't know that was what I was doing. I believe that things are changing because more people are beginning to trust their inner voice. I was listening to a YouTube video about why artists create. And one woman was telling me, and this is something I've heard because I used to be a counselor. Many people would call, I worked for the Mental Health Association of San Francisco, and I was a phone counselor, trained as a peer counselor. people were so depressed, and this was around COVID and all that. I heard people who were first generation immigrants, they were struggling as young people because their parents came from wherever. They were born here. They were American. They went to American schools. But they were trying to please their parents, and at the same time they were trying to be like all the other kids who they were around. And they were torn, and it made them depressed because they didn't know who they were. They were struggling to discover who they were as individuals. And I think that is probably the human struggle today. Because when I was growing up, my grandmother used to, I used to love my grandparents, going over my grandparents' place, because it was so quiet and peaceful over there. My grandmother used to do quilting, and I didn't know until I came to California that there was an African-American quilting tradition. But you know what? I wasn't interested, because I am not a domestic type person. I don't sew. And the reason I bring that up is because I think my generation was probably one of the last generations of the end of the baby boom generation to be attached to the past. But people who were older than me, they're probably more invested in the past. I am not. So I was not interested in the things my grandparents could have taught me, because I realized that, what am I going to do? I took home ec in school. We were the last generation of kids to do that. They had the girls who were doing home economics and typing, because we're going to be secretaries, and the boys were in shop. The generation after that, the girls wanted to do shop, and some of the boys may have wanted to go into home ec, because it's this idea of channeling children based on their gender to where they should be. That's going away. Kids can do whatever they want, and there are still some parents probably out there who give their daughters dolls. I didn't want to play with a doll. I had 2 brothers. I wanted to play with trucks. We climbed trees. I was what they called a tomboy. There are some girls who are girly girls. Some boys who like to play with tea sets. But that's what they gave kids based on their gender. Here are your toys. These are what you play with. And they were basically created to begin to condition you to gender roles. That's changing. Girls' names are changing. You see Rileys. You see all kinds of different interesting names, which I think is really cool. Because back in the day, I mean, there were names that, your typical girls' names. Girls wore pink and boys wore red. I mean, that whatever that was, pink and blue when they were, babies were born. And people are questioning a lot of that. People are questioning whether or not boys should get circumcised. People are questioning whether or not parents should be concerned about their children's gender at all. Let the kids decide who they are. It's not up to the parents. So all of these things, I don't know if I'm answering your question directly, but they're all kind of connected to what I see is going on the planet, how people are wanting to discover who they are, what they want their gender to be, how they want to present themselves to the world. And, the idea of binary thinking is going away. They're finding, even with the way the mind works, is that there is a spectrum of everything. There's no such thing as, there is a such thing. All of these things exist. It's just how you conceptualize them. There is, I learned when I was in counseling about neurodivergence, people's brains that are kind of wired a little differently. There are children, people who have dyslexia. That's a neurodivergent condition. Different people on the autism spectrum. All kinds of different ways that people understand things. Back in the day, they would call you disabled, maybe differently able. People on the autism spectrum, I don't think it's a disability. I think it's something that we don't understand yet. There are people who are screaming and yelling out on the streets. We don't really know what that is. My father was a paranoid schizophrenic, and he spent the last years of his life in a mental institution back when they had them. We don't really know what that's like, what that means. When I was a counselor, there were people who didn't want to take their medication because of the side effects. That's what's happening on the street. You can't make anybody take medication. Some of them told me that it made them gain tremendous amounts of weight. It made them feel zombified. It made them suffer insomnia. So they wouldn't take it. And then they would have episodes. And then they end up on the street. One lady told me on the phone that she was ready to lock her grandson out because he was living with her and he wouldn't take his medication. And she was afraid of him. So what is mental illness? That's also going to be something that we're going to have to look at differently. You can't put people in an institution in a building somewhere. It's been done. The reason all of those institutions went away is because of abuses. Same thing that happens in prison. You can't keep building more and more and more and more and more and more prisons. We got to figure out what is going on with people. Everyone, I think people are more aware today. Hurt people hurt people. People don't abuse children unless something has happened to them in the same capacity. People don't bully other people unless they were bullied. People who come from loving families, supportive families, they're generally happy people. Why wouldn't they be? Because it's natural to be happy. Babies are happy. And the only time they cry is when something is bothering them. But they're always up for fun. You look at little animals, it's the same thing. They're always running around and playing because life is fun. So these are things that we're looking at diet. We're looking at imagery. We're looking at music. So many different things that can contribute to well-being, and other things that may do the opposite. And what goes on in people's minds, because that's why so many people are interested in meditation, because the mind can run. And lots of people have invasive negative thoughts that become a loop. And then when an invasive negative thought becomes a loop, it kind of digs a groove, and it becomes habitual, and you don't know how to break it. So when people learn to meditate, they learn how to get out of their head and move into their body. That's what martial arts teaches. That's what a lot of different teachings. And when we're children, we don't think. We're taught to leave our center of knowing to go up into your head and become logical. The mind has its place, but as far as living in one's head conditionally is not a good thing. Well, people are, I think, hopefully become more involved in their own education, because the former system of education was one that imagined that the teachers are experts and they're going to dump into your head what they feel is important. But education, the old system of education, is built on people control, basically, to prepare people to enter work life in factories. It's based on a 19th century model. So today's education is going to need to develop, certainly technology is going to be a part of it. But people also, I think it's important to be physically inclined, because I don't know how much kids get out and do physical stuff, because we used to run and climb, and I don't really see that. A lot of kids, I guess, they're in, playing on their phones, and that's another discussion. But yeah, physical training is still important. Every now and then I'll see somebody take their kid to some martial arts studio. But yeah, reimagining what it means to be educated, because in the past it was mainly based on Eurocentric values. When I went to school, there was nothing discussed about what people of African descent had done. And I had a lot of internalized oppression around that, feeling like black people didn't do anything. We were just slaves. And that took me decades to get over. At least I was raised in a Jewish community. And my teachers, especially, I'll never forget this woman, Esther Solomon. I took a class of, was it 10th or 11th grade, British literature. And it was a very challenging class for the smart kids. And she told me at that time, she said, you have a mind, and I hope you use it. Because I was a bright kid. But like a lot of kids, I only studied enough to get a C, because sitting in a classroom, taking notes and taking tests, I didn't find that really that interesting. Regurgitating stuff, writing papers, that's what we did, and being stressed out because you had a test, or feeling like that your self-esteem was built around a grade system. If you got a C, you felt bad. You want to work harder to get an A to prove you were a good person. What kind of bullshit is that? So reimagining what it means to inspire people to be who they are, to find out. When I was working in the nonprofit sector, they were also back then moving away from telling, like I was involved with Global Exchange, and before that it was Overseas Development Network, going into foreign countries as missionary type social justice people, telling people in communities what they should do, rather than ask them what they want, rather than tell them what they should do. The same thing with education. Everything, the Buddha's saying, how we do anything is how we do everything. So taking these ideas and applying them. Ask children what they want. My mother and I once got into an argument about something. She bought me some apples once, and I didn't eat them. She said, Kim, I thought you liked apples. I said, you didn't ask me if I wanted any. It's a different question. Yes, I like them. Same thing when she'd buy me clothes. You didn't ask me if I'm not wearing those. So yes, finding out, don't assume people don't know. And if they don't know, question them further. Because eventually, when people say they don't know, it's because they're not quite sure. It doesn't mean they really don't know. They're still feeling around. And I would, when someone tells me, a child or someone tells me they don't know, it's like, it's okay, you'll figure it out. That's what I tell them, you'll figure it out. So I don't give advice. If people ask me a question, I'll tell them, what I think about it, but basically what other people should do, or what should I do when X? People would say that, ask me that on the phone. I don't know. You'll have to figure it out.
Hello, my name is Kim, and I am 16. A memorial to me is a memory. Like, if we break it down in the word, it kind of sounds like memory, memorial. So I would say it's to keep something alive, something either from someone who has passed, or maybe just like a snippet of a moment, like a really good moment that you want to relive, and like kind of like a picture, you capture the moment. I think a person can be memorialized in so many different ways. Like, we, as people, we have graveyards. Those are basically memorials. Like, those gravestones, they basically say a person's name, like when they died, who they are, but not really getting to know them since they don't really have a voice. But I think things to remember those people, like how we put flowers, or how we would put things that are special to them. Like, for example, like when a person dies in my family, we all have like a tradition where we grab a bunch of food and we place it in front of that, like place it in front of their gravestone, and we burn incense, and it's kind of like an offering. So it's like, and food is, in my family, is definitely a love language. Yeah, food is definitely a love language, even when we're alive till, like, even when we have passed, like, away. it's still like special to our heart, and I think it's like, what is it? It's stereotypically in my culture, we're known as like people who don't say I love you, but that I love you is with food. Definitely with food. I love my grandmother's cooking. Oh my god. One of my favorite foods from my grandmother is this seaweed and tofu soup, and I love eating it with rice. It's so good. It's so comforting, and I love her cooking so much. I also love making fried rice with her. It's something like kind of you throw together, and it's like one of those quick meals that you just kind of throw, it's like a throw in one pot sort of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like those one pot wonders? It's kind of like that. But like in my culture, I love scallion pancakes. So good. The first person who comes to mind is my aunt. She's literally like the first person who I would kind of call to when I'm having like a panic attack or like an emotional, like distressing kind of situation. And I feel like she's so wise in a way, not to make her sound old. She's honestly, for her age, she's really pretty. But I just believe that she's done so much for me. She's been there at my lowest. She's helped me through my complicated like emotions that I will like sometimes have, and yeah, sorry, yeah, from my lowest lows and to my highest highs, I feel like she's been there. Like, she's always been concerned with, like, for example, my emotional state. I'm a very emotional person, and we both, we both have, like, talked it through the things that have happened through our lives, and I think she knows me the best in those ways. And, yeah, I think she's someone who's very close to my heart, and she's the one who, like, if someone tells me, like, who's your favorite in the family? Don't tell that to anybody else. My lessons? Oh, I've learned so much from her. And one of those things was after my first relationship, I was a complete mess. And something I really learned from her was, like, life goes on. And I really shouldn't have been so hung up on this, like, single thing that's, like, just a bump in the road. And it's literally just something on the side. It's gonna go away quicker, and you're, like, it's gonna go away so quick that, like, you won't even notice it. And you're gonna laugh about it, like, probably a few months down the line. Heck, even years. And she's also helped me through, like, getting, like, even communicating. Like, communication is so much easier said, I feel like, than it's actually perceived. And she has helped me, like, communicate, to other people. Like, it can be as simple as communicating with my grandmother. She speaks more Cantonese. I'm kind of struggling, because my Cantonese is not the best. I speak I speak English a majority of the time. So something as simple as, like, translating something to my grandmother, to talking to my mom or, like, my dad or my parents, and like getting through to them. It's kind of easier to tell an adult to talk to another adult. Well, the first thing that came to mind, which is more of a symbolic thing, is that I think one of the first times when I was having, like, a really bad panic attack, she described something about a rose, and she tried to kind of fixate my mind on something and focus on imagining something, and so I could calm down. And I think that, like, a golden rose, and she started describing it, and I think that's something I kind of picture when I think of her. and like some of the other things is like a lot more kind of casual, personal, and it's like, what is it? She was really into Care Bears, so like whenever I think of Care Bears, I think of her, and also what is it? I'm pretty sure she's her Chinese zodiac. She's the year of the monkey, so I feel like, what is it? That also reminds me of her. So like not only just really like deep symbolic things, but also like the casual, like I feel like what like our family knows. Yeah, I think growth is something not only big that we've talked about with each other, it's also something I've experienced with her. So even like from a young age to now, I think it's definitely a big jump from jumping comparison. And I think that's something I'm really grateful for. I feel like memorials really highlight either like one side of a person, either the really, really good where they're a hero, or like something kind of really bad. So I would, if possible, hypothetically, if I were to have a memorial, I would want to see not only people's perspective of me on a good manner, but also in a bad. Like in the bad of what is it? What are their negative opinions of me? Because one, that kind of makes me curious on what others think of me, but also I think that also just that makes me curious, but also I think I have like that social anxiety where I'm like, I don't think anybody likes me, but I would just like to see someone, like, everybody's true opinions of me, and I think that would make me feel better, like true opinion, not like, you know, those hate comments you see on like, what is it, on social media. I don't want those like blank statements. It just feels like you're protecting yourself in front of a screen. I want the true face. I want to see what others think face to face. Mm-hmm. And that's how I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered as someone who wasn't all good, but also like I can be highlighted to be seen as someone. I mean, like, there's like everybody has their own lives, and everybody has their own backgrounds, and who knows, you might be someone's villain. You might be someone's villain in your story. But I just believe that's so interesting to me. So I wouldn't want, like, no one wants to be remembered as someone bad, but I would like to see who was I the villain to.
Yes, my name is Everett Herrera, and I'm 69 years old. A memorial represents tradition, our culture, something very important to the country. Big in national memorials more than anything, and it's why I brought up Washington, and it's really an impressive city to go see. We spend several days doing that. It's not like an amusement park or anything, but all the memorials have a lot of meaning and history behind them. So it's sometimes you could pick up the history while you're taking a tour of that area, you know, the Washington Mall, and the guide will fill you in on why they did this, why they did that, or it's better if you read a little bit about it, then that's much more meaningful. For instance, like the Lafayette Park that's outside the White House. And I think the president can see it from one of the Oval Office windows, and that's traditionally a park that demonstrators go there sometimes, and so that park was in play, I think, during the first Trump administration, where some protesters went to the park and were protesting against him and government presidential overreach. So that was an interesting day. But so there's stories behind. Basically, there's parks, there's walking areas, there's the mall. And then there's memorials like the Lincoln Memorial, which is down one of the branches off the Washington Memorial. And it's very solemn. It's up against the river, and you walk in, and there's just a giant sculpture of President Lincoln. Well, I'm 69 years old right now, and basically I came from I'm Mexican American. I have 5 sisters. I'm the only boy, and we had a pretty close knit family. We were wonderful parents, and they grew up poor, but they somehow they got smart, and they always invested their money, and they bought property. So when speaking of memorials, over the last 8 years, they both passed away. So that was tough for the whole family, and we were. I think every one of my sisters would say the same thing. We miss them a lot, and sometimes we cry a little bit, on our own, because they taught us a lot. They did so much for us, because they grew up, in Corpus Christi, Texas, in the Mexican American portion of town, where some of the people had dirt floors. My grandfather had a little tiny store, grocery store, and he ended up giving half the food away because nobody could pay for it. And my father did not have a mother. She had passed away while he was a young kid. So he had a tough life, 2 older brothers, but he worked hard all his life. So we all remember them. They ended up leaving us a house worth $1.5 million, that we all got to split up. I mean, doesn't happen every day. It's not a lot of money to split up, but it's very generous. And I remember talking to him before he passed away that I told him he had a very successful life. My father, just by example, he was not anywhere near a perfect person. He drank a little bit, not a lot. He played cards, liked to gamble sometimes, smoke a cigarette here and there, and he played golf all the time. He was a sportsman. He got me out in the golf course when I was a young kid, where I was like 8 or 9 years old. So I started to play for a while, and I always liked sports. I grew to like sports. I was as a child, I was kind of very shy and kind of awkward a little bit. Plus, with five sisters around, you're never comfortable. So, and some of them would, when I was younger, I know they would play around with me in girls' clothes, so I had to put up with that. But I think they helped my mother keep a very clean house, and my mother was an amazing person. She kind of made everything happen. She had energy for everybody. She had time for everybody's problem, including my father's. My father, not having a mother, that was his second mother. That's really his mother, and he would rely on her on certain things. You can tell that she did something for him that he probably really couldn't have lived unless he had it, because he didn't have my grandfather was old school, and his mother died when he was about 8. Okay, so he was basically raised by his brothers, his older brothers, which are big, huge guys. My father's about my size. His brother's about 6'4", and his sister and aunts, they raised him. And so he had some, I would say, issues that what I would call a personality disorder, because he grew up with out parents there. Well, I think my mother was kind of his parent, okay, and he relied on her so much. He was so much in love with her that he was lucky to have her. She basically raised 7 children, basically on her own, and she was a time when I was in junior high school, I think, where I was a latchkey kid, because we needed the money. My father worked at American Airlines his whole life, and my mother also had a job where she wouldn't get home till about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So they worked a lot, and they worked hard, and they gave us a better life. We always had people around. My father had friends, my mother had friends, and she always had people around coming over to the house that she'd cook dinner for. And they socialize a lot. We have cousins, second cousins in the area, about 3 families that in Newark, Alameda, and San Jose that we socialize with. So that socialization, I think that we could see her. What she was really trying to teach us is be nice to everyone. It's the better angels ideal. I mean, reading about Lincoln, he talks about what made Lincoln so effective is his better angels, as he described it. Let's accept people for who they are, and if they disappoint us, well, we'll judge that as we go along. You accept them wholly. And my mother, when she was the person I was around most often, that she was just a marvelous person. She was so giving, so she would naturally give to you and do things for you, and make you feel comfortable, and so you learn things. That's why I got interested in education, and going to school and studying art, and learning new things because of her. She made me feel comfortable. And children can't really grow and blossom unless they have a safe environment. So she set the standard. Treat people nice, and they will treat you back nice. And everybody has a story. This is something that I added to what my father and mother did was just that. They treated everybody nice. They were very social, and they're always fair. They would never do anything to harm somebody or to, have people maybe get in arguments. They'll disagree with you, but they'll agree to disagree. They're very diplomatic, and they treated us. When we go over somebody's house, we had to be quiet and we had to act properly. And if we did act out, we would get in trouble. Okay, so we wouldn't do that. And I think our mother would expect that, and father too. But one of the things I added is I'd like to know is when I do meet people, I'd like to hear their story. I'd like to hear what's happened in their life or what's interesting. There usually are some significant things that really drive who they are. Yes, absolutely. Made me feel good.
Yeah.
And there are times when I do have friends in let's say the Tenderloin that don't do so well. And so I just ran across them, I met them through some circumstances, and I'll go over there and help them a little bit. Sometimes they need some guidance, and maybe a little bit of money. And it just makes me feel good. Nobody has to know about it because they suffer. I think we see it every day. I mean, most of the people in the Tenderloin, the homeless, touch on that subject, are they have mental impairments, and I say that from someone who does have some mental impairments myself. That's what I was kind of angling towards, that discussion, until I thought I knew something was wrong with me because going to college I would do really good, and then all of a sudden too bad for a while. Not a while, but maybe with tests. I'd panic at a test. So I knew I had something that didn't work right in my brain. And there sometimes when I experienced depression, I would get depressed, and so I had to watch myself in terms of what I got involved with. And I always had to have something to do to keep me uplifted. People keep me uplifted if they have the right attitude, and so I relied on that for a long time. But I always knew something was wrong with me. I had some anxiety and some depressive disorders. When I ended up getting divorced the first time, it hit me hard. It took me a while to really kind of put myself back together. But I was guarded there, and I actually started reading about behavioral health. That's another subject matter that I thought was interesting. Why do we think the certain way we do? And I always knew my father. When you grow up without a mother and without good parents, or you grow up in a foster care home, you have what doctors call personality disorders, and that's usually the behavior of being too. Sometimes you get angry too fast, and you don't trust people, and you don't necessarily have the empathy, and that's usually the first level of learning. A small child, when they're first born, the mother has to take the baby, as the doctor puts her, and after she had the baby, cuts the cord, puts the baby right on the mother's breast so he can eat, because the baby doesn't know anything. It's just looking for food and nourishment. And the mother has to do everything for it for the first year, practically. It's exhausting. And the dad's got to be there to support her. That's why having two people there is essential to create a good person. A person with a well-rounded temperament and is willing to learn and use their mind, use their frontal cortex, as a human being, as opposed to just reacting. People with personality disorders can be mean sometimes, but because we don't understand them, they don't understand the real world. They don't have these. You develop, when you're anywhere from 1 to 10, you develop these micro behaviors from people that you communicate with, and you just we do it naturally once we're maybe 18, 19 years old, because we learn the nuances of human communications, both verbal and physical, in terms of what the person's eyes look like. Are they guarded? You learn to read that yourself. And it's a very fine-tuned skill, and some people who grew up in a foster home, for instance, that don't have a parent to take care of them and feel loved, they won't have that. They won't learn those things, and they have personality disorders. So I knew my father had a little bit of that. He would get angry once in a while, and so I started reading about it, and some of it's hereditary. Okay, for instance, if you have depressive disorders or if you have ADD, which I have, or bipolar. That's usually hereditary. And personality disorders are separate. So, but I get my second son, went to kindergarten the first time. After about 3 months, we got a call back from the school that we need to come down and talk to them because they had problems with my son. Turned out he had some very severe learning disabilities, which are on the same causal tract in terms of that's what they're caused from. My parents' genes. There's nothing you can do about it. You're gonna have that impairment, and you're gonna struggle with some parts of life. But that's just the way it works. That's the way the world's created. And so I like to think that we can raise our education system to better serve people like the homeless people in the Tenderloin. That we need to, and we can do that. It's just the knowledge that what their impairment's all about and how it happened. The fact that it's not their fault is very significant to me because they should have the same opportunities that everybody else has. The American dream. Get married and have a house, get a job, contribute to society in a meaningful way. Nothing builds self-esteem better than accomplishing something and getting a paycheck. That the government needs to make a better effort to raise up these people in the Tenderloin and give them the opportunity to have the same thing I had. The opportunity to learn, go to a good school, and earn a living. It's something I'm proud of. And I think it did contribute to society. One of the things at Intel that we collectively created is the first PC. When during that period of time, microprocessors were just being invented. Intel was like a $200 million company at that point when I first joined. And nowadays, I think they're like 40 billion, 50 billion, 60 billion. And they basically built a personal computer industry. They're one of the players that built the personal computer industry. We didn't have computers. There was no such thing as a personal computer when I joined. They were building microprocessors that were single chip computers. Typical big computers during those days were built by IBM and companies like Cray or Data General that usually would fill a room about this size. They'd have to have special power brought into the room and air conditioning for it, and people in white coats that would manage the operations because they weren't PCs, they didn't have a screen, and they didn't have a graphical user interface. Those were all invented, right about the time I was going to college. And one of our professors at Stanford took us to a place called Xerox PARC, where it was a research facility run by Xerox. A lot of scientists, a lot of pioneers in the computer industry worked there. And that's where Steve Jobs and Bill Gates went to get ideas on how to build Apple and how to build the model. Bill Gates went there to look at what they were doing. That's where he got the inspiration to build Windows, okay, in the same building. And I was able to see the same demonstrations they saw in that period of time. And so the products we built at Intel created the cores for the PC revolution. And the computers in those days cost millions of dollars to put in a big room that was special service for the whole company. Nowadays, we were going to build a computer that was going to fit on somebody's desk, and we had no idea what people would use it for. And that was so much innovation in like 5 years. I think somebody compared it to like the airline transportation industry, what Orville and Wilbur Wright did when they flew that funny-looking airplane on a beach somewhere, and it flew 200 feet, and they were really excited. Well, 90 years later, we have these 747s that can fly halfway across the world in 10 hours, and you're up there in complete comfort. And that took 8 or 90 years. Well, in the computing industry, we're moving like 10 times faster. There's so much innovation. One of them is called Moore's Law. When chips get smaller, more powerful, less power. Your phone there has more computing power than probably a handful of those big supercomputers we used to use. We used to buy for each one of them would cost $1 million. And we couldn't have them on a desk. They were too big. They were in separate rooms by themselves. But your phone there has more computing power in it by probably a factor of 10.
My name is Torok, and I'm 25. I think a memorial to me is something that not only honors someone, but does it in like an unselfish way, where it's like not about the person who's making it, but it's like wholly in celebration of whatever it is that you're memorializing or whoever you're memorializing, and that sort of like gives the feeling of knowing them to the people that come across it. I think honestly, this is a really tough, like, how you would memorialize someone is such a like nuanced thing that really depends on the individual, right? It's like you have to think about, I think, how they would see themselves or how they would like want to be seen, and then also the realities like of their life. I think any project I had that was involved with memorializing someone, I'd have to handle differently based on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So culturally for me it's complicated because there's like 5 different ones competing at all times. But I think one of the big ones is storytelling. I think, especially my grandfather, I get basically my entire personality. All the best parts of me come from a combination of my grandparents. But when it comes to storytelling, especially my grandfather, he can tell you about, I think he has a story about like finding a shopping cart in a place where it's not supposed to be, and everyone will be on the edge of their seat just like, and then what happened? And I think that's a really core thing. There's a lot of people, I guess I was already talking about my grandparents earlier, so I'll talk about them a little bit more. I think when I try to imagine if I'm like being a good person or doing the right thing, the people that I see in my head, like looking down on my decisions, but also like when I'm thinking about like where I want to go, is always going to be my grandparents on my dad's side. They're just incredible, and they make, you know, both of them had hard lives. No one could begrudge them for being bitter, and they're just kind, and they say it's a decision they make every morning. They're really fantastic. I think like Miami is kind of a rough place to grow up. It's very superficial. It gives you an impression of people as like, you know, I definitely believed that people were like born selfish and had to like learn how to be okay with each other. And someone who really changed that for me is my grandmother. She's just, despite having like truly suffered and had so much difficulty in her life in so many ways, she wakes up, she says, I'm going to be nice to people today. I'm going to be this version of myself today. And then she just does it, and it's work, and she makes it look so effortless. But I think anybody who has that effect in your life is just like working really hard in the background to make that possible. I think it's that, like, if I had to think of a specific lesson, it would be like sort of like being the person that you want to be as a choice. It's not something that just happens to you one day. It's not something that's easy every day, and it's not something that you can like always get right. You know, let's say I get overstimulated a lot with like loud noises, and if I don't eat, I can become pretty irritable. But generally, the version of myself that I want to present is one that I do actively and intentionally to set a standard. I think that like it's kind of that rising tide lifts all ships thing. Like if you're coming into it with a good attitude, it's so much easier for everyone else that's working with you to come in with the same. And I think that goes for almost any social interaction. A lot of times, just not being awful is such a godsend. Or just like putting yourself on the line to like reach out can really make a difference. Yeah, so a lot of my teaching comes from actually martial arts. I did jiu-jitsu way before I even drew. I used to fight, which wasn't great either, way before I even drew. And probably my favorite book on philosophy is Musashi Miyamoto's Book of Five Rings. And a lot of the philosophy in martial arts and like the way that you practice it is that, you know, in art you can kind of say, oh, well, this is my style, and use that to like cover things, right? Or you can be like, oh, you know, let me just rely on this one facet of my identity that's like hot right now and like make a bunch of work based on that. Like there's ways to cheat it. There's also like, well, let me just have a rich friend who starts buying it, and then I can say it costs this much. There's a lot of ways you can get around it. When you're on the mat, you can't hide behind anything. There's absolutely nothing that you can do than just like be you and be the best you that you can be. And there's something so truly humbling about that and like honest about that, that it's like, you know, you go in, and if someone's better than you, you know they're better than you, and you're there to learn. And if someone's worse than you, you know they're worse than you, and you're there to teach. And it's a very clear, but also very supportive environment of like everyone is lifting everyone else up, or learning. And you know, it's very easy to be humble when you know what's going to happen if you get on the mat, because there isn't anywhere that you can hide. I try to bring that idea of like, I know that I have a certain level of skill, and I know that you know, I'm always going to continue to keep refining it, but it's almost an obligation if you know how to do something to bring it to other people, you know, and to be gentle in that time of them learning it. And then also, like, there's a compassion that comes from my parents. It's like, for my grandparents, I think I really want the kids to, like, think critically about the world that they're in, and to feel like, you know, they have a place that they can come and bring those thoughts. And that's definitely for my grandparents, because that's how you ultimately, like, refine your technique and your ideas and, like, yourself as a person, is by, like, challenging it and being like, well, you know, what about this? What about this? What about this? And you need someone who's going to take that seriously. Yeah, so there's a drink from Argentina called mate that you're supposed to have it with your friends. It's really, really a big part of the culture. And I have that really solidly associated with my abuela. And I make it almost every morning, specifically because I wish I was having my morning at their house. It's, even though my dad drinks it too, for me it's so solidly her in the kitchen talking while we're, you know, I'm sitting there with her and she's making a cup of that in the morning. I think I really want to make a piece that can get that across on some level one day. So as far as I know, it used to be, I think it was a Native American practice, and then Argentina is one of the most, like, horribly colonized countries on Earth. Like, it was a genocide. And somehow this particular practice, like, stuck around and is, like, ubiquitous with the place. Like, I think I saw a statistic that said that Argentinians see mate as a bigger part of their culture than beef, even though the rest of the world says beef. So the actual, like, reasoning behind that is probably, you know, you could do some research and it's, like, lost to time. But for us, it's just, like, known. It's just, this is how you do it, and it's been how you do it for a really, really long time. Well, when it comes to, like, I guess respecting the memory and, like, keeping it in my life, right? Like, I try to call them once a week, or more, if I can. I also, I make an effort, I think, to make their lives easier whenever I'm around. And also to give them, like, their due grace, I guess, in moments like this, right? Where, like, I'm being asked, well, how did I get to be the way that I am? And it's like, of course, the first people I'm going to talk about is them. I've had other mentors. I've been really lucky in that way. I've always had, you know, not always, but I always sort of right myself when I find, like, the person in the situation that I'm in that can, like, guide a little bit. And I've been able to find some really amazing people that way. But I think that ultimately what it comes down to is them, and I need to be clear about that a lot. So, like, the next piece that I'm working on is actually going to be, like, the comic I'm working on is going to be with them attributed, and also my friend Lucy, for not only being the inspiration, but also for being in the comics homeroom, keeping me accountable all the time. That one keeps me up at night. I have no idea how I want to be remembered, because I have no idea what the future looks like, and I don't think anyone does. And I think there's going to be, unfortunately, a large body of my work dedicated to that idea of, like, how can I possibly make responsible decisions and plan for a future that no one can understand, and then suffer consequences for those decisions, which will inevitably happen. I think if I could be remembered as anything, I'd like to not be shitty. Maybe someone who, like, helps other people and, like, you know, try to live a good life. But I guess, like, real, like, pie in the sky would be, like, I'd like to be somebody who made critical thinking chic and cool. And my pieces are kind of along those lines.
My name is Elizabeth Dunlap. I'll be 62 on Saturday.
Oh, happy birthday.
And I've lived here for it'll be 32 years in December. I grew up in Potrero Hill. I'm actually a native. I was born at Letterman Hospital. My grandfather's from Italy. My mom's side of the family is Italian. I don't know my dad's side at all, so to me I'm Italian. So my grandpa had a house. I grew up in Potrero Hill. And then I moved out at 19, and then went to City College in State. And thought I'd be teaching, but I'm not. I'm actually teaching now, but I'm teaching adults and with disabilities and seniors. I help them with tech questions. I work with Community Living Campaign, so I do that a couple times, or at least once a week. In something that you write or something, like if you do if you're thinking about your memories, you could like write it in a journal or something, or you could maybe do like a, you know, think of a memory you have maybe, like, and draw it or something. I'm on the mural here at 580 Cap Street, and almost everybody on the mural is some resident that has lived here, except maybe one person, but there's only two of us alive, right, that still live here, that are still alive. So
do you think those images keep memories alive in some ways? The painting?
Yeah, possibly. Especially for the people who know the people that are on the mural.
Who painted the mural?
Dan Fonts. He's pretty, I think, famous, semi-famous. He's done a few different murals. You guys could look him up on Google or wherever. It's called La Salute, so if you guys want it. And when I first moved here, almost 32 years ago, one of the things Dan asked me, what was the thing about moving here at Bethany that you really liked? And at the time, moving out at 19 and not being able to live somewhere where I could have a pet, I was like, I really like the fact that I can have a pet. And Bava passed a few, he's the black cat that's on the mural that I have. I have a fascination with black and white cats. Growing up, we had a lot of cats. But the two favorite that I grew up with, they were very vocal, so I really liked the fact that they kind of interacted with you. And so one of my cousins, she also had black cats, so I inherited that love of black cats. Anyway, he passed away a few years after the mural was completed. I mean, after, like 2 or 3 years, and they did a film about the mural. By then he had passed away. I just usually point it out to people. They're looking at it, or they're doing a mural walk or something. I go, that's me. And they're like, really?
Yeah.
That's 30 some odd years ago. 97, so I don't know, 67. I think I was like 33. I don't know. I don't feel like doing math. I would say of my immediate family, it would be my grandpa. He was very important in my life. I called him Nana, so my Nana, and he thought of me as being very special, whereas a lot of people in my family just kind of not ignored me, but my family situation's a little weird. But anyway, but he thought of me as being very special. So we had like one-on-one time a lot. And another person would be my cousin, Roseanne, who passed away when I was like, well, they both actually passed away in the same year. And my cousin, Roseanne, was the one person in my family, I think, that didn't look at me as a person with a disability. And she kind of taught me, like, independent living skills. Like, she took the time to say, you know, let's do this, or, you know, my manual dexterity, especially when I was younger, was a little hard. Like, she took the time to help me figure out, how would you cut your meat yourself? How would you do this? We did things where she didn't, like, make my disability an issue. Whereas some of my people, some family members, like older aunt, and I understand it, she would, like, not want, like, my crutches in certain pictures, or, like, even though she knew I used crutches, like, one time her mom, after she passed, took me up to Tahoe for my 21st birthday when I was 22. And at the time I was having a lot of hip pain, so one of my other cousins took us up there. And I said to my other cousin, my mom's the youngest of 5. And so, anyway, so one of my other cousins took us up there. And I was like, do you mind if I bring my wheelchair? Well, my aunt wanted to take a picture, but she made me stand by the tree and hold on to the tree instead of sitting in the wheelchair. I was like, okay, I know where that's coming from, but I understand it. It's how she grew up, but it's a little different. My cousin, like I said, helped me be independent, and she didn't look at me the way my other family members did, so that really helped. I don't know. My cousin, I guess, just made me think about the interactions of my family and not to put the guilt on me, which was really hard. Because I used to think, like, my mom and dad split up because I was disabled, and it was other things that were going on with our family dynamics, just our family in general. So, yeah. I had planned on being an elementary school teacher, but it didn't quite work out. I found out that I had a learning disability in college, which when I asked my special ed teacher, who wasn't really my special ed teacher because I was fully mainstreamed in high school in the early 80s and late 70s. I mentioned to her, I find it really odd that I found out I had a learning disability in college. And she's like, well, it showed up in your IEPs, but we didn't know how to deal with it. I'm like, it would have been nice if you mentioned it because you knew I wanted to go to college. But I worked it out. It just took me a little longer to go through college than I expected. And I thought I'd be teaching kids. But when you have a learning disability, the stress of student teaching comes out more. And also, if any of you want to go into teaching, just so you know, especially at San Francisco State, when they say, we're going to match you up with the best master teacher that fits your teaching style. Not true. It's whoever decides to have a student in their classroom. And if they don't think you're ready to do your solo week, you don't pass. And I did it twice. And I got to a point then, I know I can teach, but I got really nervous, so it was kind of like, okay, forget it. But I teach now. I teach with Community Living Campaign, which is an agency that helps persons with disabilities and seniors with, what I do is once a week at least, they have I teach, I'm online, and I'm there to answer any tech questions, like if somebody has a question about iPhone, their Windows computer, their Mac, if they want, like, how do you do this? And then another friend and I, who also has a disability, once a month we teach, like, we talk about accessible tools on your computer or iPhone or whatever phone, and what you can use for accessibility to make your life easier if you have a disability, like if you're mobility impaired, hearing impaired, vision impaired. But you don't have to particularly be any of those to be able to use those tools. They're just there as accessibility tools. Like a lot of people will use larger print, like if you've got your phone in your purse, for example, or somewhere, and you have the flash on and somebody calls, that's like for somebody who's hearing impaired. But if you have it in your purse and you don't want somebody to interrupt, you can see the flash, so oh, there's my phone. Stuff. It's not accessibility isn't always about being. It's for people with any particular disability, but you don't always have to be disabled to use it. There are a couple things I can remember about my grandpa. I remember when I was really young, in the back porch, because I grew up on Patrol Hill, I can remember sitting on a rocking chair that he had. I wasn't super young, but I wasn't super old either. Like seven or so, sitting on the rocking chair with him and watching the boats in the bay go by. And then one other one, when I was about 13, my grandpa had fallen off the roof trying to fix it, so he ended up kind of having a minor stroke and breaking his leg. And I remember when I was in junior high school coming home and just going, okay, time to go, Grandpa. I would keep him company until, for a while, and I'd sit up, watch TV with him, do homework or whatever. Grandpa was really important to me. I look at the one of the very few things I have of his is Italian American dictionary. A lot of things I had that were given to me were actually taken back by my oldest aunt. It's the only thing that I have, basically, of his that wasn't taken away.
Wow.
My aunt gave me my grandfather's bed and then my brother needed a bed, and she's like, you gotta give it to your brother. I'm like, okay. And then, I was gonna eventually, I moved somewhere else, and then I moved here. But what I had originally planned on doing is taking like the casters off of it and putting new casters on and like redoing the veneer when I had a chance. But she goes, your brother needs a bed. You got to give that your brother, because I was leaving it where I used to live and letting somebody else use it. Well, I couldn't have it in the place I was because the place was too small. And she said, your brother needs a bed. You got to give it to your brother. And I'm like, okay, you can have it. But my aunt did that a lot. Mm-hmm. She would give me something and then say, I have to give it back. I'm like, okay, fine, just take it.